Resident Evil 7 promised to bring the series back to its roots with a smaller scale story devoid of world-ending disasters, freeing itself from decades worth of previously established backstory. It may have changed the perspective, but to me, it successfully recaptured the feel of the originals. The horror was back, the atmosphere was rich, and the items scarce. RE7 has haters, but to me, it was a breath of fresh air which revitalized the Resident Evil franchise into what it is today. The gaming public at large agreed, and the game went on to sell 12.7 million units. Now, even though the game set out to bring the series back to its glory days, the reality of game development in this day and age is you can never really expect a game to exist on its own, especially when it's successful. And so, RE7 had 4 separate DLCs released across its launch year. Now in this review, I'm going to be looking at the 2 pieces which are essential to RE7's story, Not a Hero and End of Zoe, which both released on the 12th of December 2017 alongside the gold edition of the game. The reason why I'm not going into banned footage volume 1 and 2 is, well, they don't have any impact on the overall game. They are fun little sections of gameplay, sure, but I need something a bit meatier, something to really chew on. This review I'm going to detail what works, what doesn't, and if these 2 additional stories are worth your time. Now let's dive in. Not a Hero was originally supposed to launch in the spring of 2017 as a free update, but was delayed in the April via a video update by producer Masachika Kawata and director Koshi Nakanishi, following concerns with the DLC's quality. This delay of 8 months from the April to the December was enough time for me to obtain my platinum of Resident Evil 7 and move on to other experiences, never bothering to boot the game back up to taste what Capcom had cooked up here. Flash forward to now, and after playing it through for the first time some 90 minutes later, I'm glad to say I had a great time with it. The story takes place immediately after the end of RE7. Chris Redfield, hot after evacuating Ethan at the end of the game, is sent to tie up one more loose end: Lucas Baker. The man who escaped the same fate as his family members is about to go toe-to-toe with the biggest, meanest, boulder-punching badass in the entire series. Oh good god, that's him, isn't it?
Look how they massacred my boy.
Jesus Christ, that redesign. It gets me every time. Chris is tasked with hunting down Lucas Baker and uncovering as much information as he possibly can on the connections, the nefarious group responsible for the E-Series line of BOWs which caused this biological disaster. Word on the street is, Lucas is hungry, and Chris is in the sandwich business. Descending into the mine, what starts as a simple get-in, get-out operation quickly becomes entangled into another of Lucas's malicious games. 3 of Chris's team are somewhere in this mine. A bomb is strapped to Chris's wrist, and a psychopath with a love for the Saw movies is watching his every move. Chris quickly makes a home in the center of the mine, which then acts as your hub containing your item box and save point. Now from here, you can then choose to go down 3 separate routes. Or you think you can. In fact, the game plays out more like a traditional Resident Evil, wherein all the routes are seemingly open to you. However, you shortly come to realize that something is blocking your path. It may be too dark, you might not have enough oxygen, you don't have the correct key, and so you need to find the correct item to be able to proceed towards the next goal. Now on paper, that is what classic Resident Evil is. You move through an area, find a door needing a specific key, and you know to come back here later when you have it. Now the thing is, the steps needed to reach said key are often multifaceted, needing to accomplish several other minor goals or puzzles before you can return, and as linear as the design ultimately is, it never appears as such. It feels like you're naturally progressing through, like you're piecing it all together as you play. With how short Not a Hero is, it doesn't have the legs to stretch out the experience to mask its linearity, and instead presents its rigidness front and center. The second you stray off down the wrong door, you realize you can't go this way, and lo and behold, the moment you start progressing down the correct one, you know at the end of the area, you'll find the item you need for the next one. Now, I'm not so much knocking the design here. Hell, I much prefer this than a straight up run and gun, which, as we are playing as Chris, I would have expected. But it's a shame that they couldn't have put a few other barriers in our way, to make us go back to previous areas we had already explored, layering the level design with added complexity, which would have pushed the thoughts of linearity out of my mind. Now, as familiar as the design ultimately is, Not a Hero does make some changes to its wider gameplay and enemies. For starters, Chris has a HUD in his helmet. Now, not only does this look cool as hell, making me feel like Samus Aran has crossed over to the RE universe, it serves a real purpose. Health condition, upgrades and oxygen level is all communicated to the player via this on-screen aid. The helmet is the core differentiator from Ethan's experience, with the majority of key items needing to progress being linked to the upgrades of the helmet itself. Surprisingly, with how much it communicates to the player, the HUD never feels cluttered. It does exactly what it needs to and helps paint the picture that Chris is a professional soldier. Backing up this perception of power is how different guns feel in Chris's hands. No longer do you have to stay completely still to get that perfect shot. Chris ADSs with pinpoint accuracy, and if an enemy dares to get too close, well... Going into this DLC, I assumed Chris's section would be one where the action would be dialed up to 11, and for the most part, that's true. Enemies aren't anywhere near the threat they were in the base game, ammo is plentiful, and heals aren't rare either, so you can move at pace if you want to. The thing is, generally speaking I didn't, and it's all due to the atmosphere. The mine is claustrophobic. All around you are the sounds of gurgling roars and you can't quite determine where they are coming from. And so, I felt myself permanently on guard even if the end result was always a crushing victory for our boy Chris. This apprehension is most effective at the start of the game, while you're hunting for the night vision goggles. Not a Hero uses fixed light sources and darkness to his advantage here to ratchet the tension, and it combines with a new enemy type, a white molded. These bastards are invulnerable to conventional firearms. To take them out, you'll need specific ammo in ramrods, and these aren't introduced till you've encountered a handful of these enemies, leaving you only one option: run. Maneuvering your way through the dark winding corridors of the mine while avoiding indestructible enemies and dealing with the ones you can is an excellent moment in this DLC. Unfortunately, this high point doesn't hang around for long, as you quickly end up finding the ramrods at the end of that area. One shot from these, and well. Now you'd think a resource like this would be extremely limited, and it certainly gives off this perception. After all, you can't craft them, you're solely reliant on what you find in the environment. But by the end of the game, just like with heals and normal ammo, I had far more than I could ever use. Now that could just be tied to my difficulty. The max it gives you is normal for a first run, and so I can't write off this mechanic here and now. All I can say is, I wish I could have bumped it up on a first experience, to make item conservation a real concern. Speaking of concerns, the base RE7 experience had a number of negatives which were picked apart by the fanbase. The first is enemy design. In RE7, it's bland. There's a lack of distinction between different types and they all kind of just blend together. The white enemies included here help this a little, but as they look exactly the same as their normal counterparts, being literally just a palette swap, Not a Hero doesn't do enough to rectify the larger issue that RE7 has always faced. Think about it. In RE1 you have spiders, crows, snakes, hunters, zombies, crimson heads, etc. And in RE7, it's just molded guys, who sure may look slightly different. One may have a sword arm, another is crawling variant filling the same role as a licker, but that's really about it. It's a shame that the lab section of the DLC doesn't experiment enough with the design of these creatures to create some truly horrific abominations. Lucas has been messing with the mold for a while now. A white invulnerable enemy is nice, but surely they could have done more here, especially as it's one of the only major downsides with the base product. Hey, I don't know, maybe I'm asking too much from DLC, but this is where you can take some real risks with designs. And who knows, if it pays off and fans love them, they can become mainstays in later entries. The second issue, which was commonly discussed as an issue with RE7, is the bosses. Outside of Marguerite, the rest of them are fairly average. In Not a Hero, there's technically two bosses. The one is just a giant version of a base game enemy, so I won't spend any time on that. But the final fight sees Chris come face to face with Lucas. This battle is genuinely gripping. The layout of the arena wafts the nostalgia gland with the familiar scent of G3 from RE2, and the moveset, while simple, is varied enough to keep the player on their toes. I died to him several times due to my own hubris going in. I had a ton of heals, stacks of ammo, I was ready to dish out the hurt. And instead, I failed at the basics, encountering the game over screen multiple times before I focused up. The fight doesn't do anything revolutionary, it keeps it simple, and it's in this simplicity that it finds satisfaction. You shoot till his weak spot is exposed, blast some more, hide from his spray attack and try to create enough space to avoid his melee swings, and then rinse and repeat. It's a far cry from the Jack Baker fight, which added in verticality and scale at the expense of an engaging battle. Ending Lucas was a welcome high to finish on, and without it, I'd probably be more critical than I have been across this review. Overall, Not a Hero tells a compelling enough story, whereby we learn more information on Blue Umbrella and the connections, but not enough to make it essential for the wider lore. We do, however, get more time with one of the most compelling villains of the RE7 story, and bringing about his demise is satisfying thanks to the changes to base gameplay. It's just a shame it doesn't have a longer runtime, which holds it back from being able to realise its true potential. But as a free add-on to RE7, there's no reason to avoid it. Give Not a Hero the 90 minutes required and see it through. It won't blow you away, but it'll certainly entertain. If Not a Hero offers slight twists on the RE7 formula, which help make it feel distinct, End of Zoe is a sharp left turn down crazy street. Beginning with a flashback to the base game, we relive the moment Ethan chose to give Mia the cure over Zoe, leaving her with a promise that he'd send help. Awakening from her calcified state, Zoe is looking pretty rough, and as here, we then see things through the eyes of Joe Baker, Zoe's uncle. He sees his niece looking a bit worse for wear, and guys in full combat gear standing over her, and being the sensible man that he is, he then lets his fist do the talking, beating the absolute shit out of these Blue Umbrella operatives. And he doesn't stop there. He then ties one up and continues to beat on him until he gets the answers he wants. Zoe is infected, she needs a cure, and as Joe puts it,
family is a righteous cause.
With that, off he goes. Now in that opening scene, Joe had a big ass knife which he used to intimidate the operative. Does he decide to take that out with him? No, he's a man's man. He only needs 3 things: spikes, spears,
And my mitts.
Now I've never been to Louisiana, so I don't know how off base I am here, but Jesus Christ, this guy is a walking stereotype. He's exactly how I imagine anyone living out in swamplands has to be. By day, he's cutting down trees with his bare fists, and by night, he's sitting on the terrace drinking moonshine. He's a man mountain. Shit, I was worried he was going to make me pregnant just by playing as him. The UK equivalent here would be like having a boss from Yorkshire.
Hey, you! Don't stand up, I'm farted, you know. No thanks.
Upon taking control of Joe, you immediately come to realize End of Zoe isn't like any Resident Evil content you've played before. Want to heal? Just rip open a tree and eat whatever is crawling inside.
Yummers.
Want to engage in combat? Just pull out your fists and beat the piss out of anything that gets in your way. It's wild. The combat is pretty straightforward. By pressing L2 or R2 you swing your fists, and by doing this in 2 different sequences, you can combo. Either a round of punches ending in a haymaker, or a quick multi-jab. It's super easy to get the hang of, and with how devastating they are to use, I felt sorry for the molded rather than any threat from them. Now there is a trade-off here. Joe has low health. A few hits without guarding and he'll go down, but to be honest, you just come in swinging, laying a biblical beatdown on anything that crosses you, and 9 times out of 10, it all works out for the best. There's one exception to this rule: those pesky gators. These critters are impossible to fight with your fists. Trust me, I tried over and over again. I believe Joe could lift one out of the water and snap it in half, but apparently the guy does have some limits. The gators are used as environmental hazards. They patrol sections of swamp, and if you get too close, they'll come at you for a one-shot kill. Your only options are avoid their path or craft a spear. That's right, this modern-day Spartan warrior doesn't use any guns at all. Instead, he crafts a 5th century BC javelin to impale anything that gets in your way. Now 99% of the time, you'll be throwing these at gators to clear a path, but depending on the enemy mix and the ground you're fighting on, they can be utilized to deal with things at range. Especially the crawlers, which can really wreck your shit if you let one of them come in on you. The simple combination of a devastating one-hit range weapon on finite resources and the unlimited use badassery of beating enemies with your hands works so well. I never wanted to use the spears, and would try my best to stock as many as I could for when the going got tough. And when that perfect opportunity presents itself, it's extremely satisfying to switch between the two to tear through whatever is in your way. Now there is one other weapon you're able to craft in a stake bomb, which is used to deal with multiple threats, but to be honest, I hardly use them. When you've got a winning formula, why bother shaking the boat? Now there's one final mechanic which is added in this scenario: stealth. With it, Joe can approach enemies while unseen, insta-killing them. What can't this guy do? It creates these great little moments when you're stalking the molded, taking them out one by one without raising the alarm. If there was ever a doubt who has the power in this game, it's here you realize.
I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
End of Zoe firmly has its tongue wedged in its cheek. It knows it's ridiculous, and it continues to mine its outrageousness at every possible turn. Hell, I literally burst out laughing at this part.
What the hell is this? One of their fancy toys?
Ready for you.
The plot, told throughout End of Zoe, is very much secondary. Files are essentially non-existent, and your focus is to keep moving forwards towards the cure. The only problem is, there's one creature that just won't quit: the Swamp Man. Now this thing appears 3 separate times as a main boss, and each time it's a straight up fistfight in a different area. Now I'm not going to spoil who or what this creature is, as the reveal itself was a nice twist in what is a straightforward experience. With having a recurring enemy, the danger can be the game starts to feel padded, like each fight is copy and pasted from the previous one. But wisely, Capcom grew the moveset with each subsequent encounter, complementing it with conversational tidbits that give deeper insight into the Baker's family's past prior to Evelyn. Overall, End of Zoe is something I never knew I needed. A totally fresh experience set within the RE7 world, and one which does accomplish its goal of bringing a satisfying end to RE7 as a whole. I'm always saying that DLC has an opportunity to take risks, to try new things, to be bold. And the proof of that concept is here in End of Zoe. It's not survivor horror, it's not even remotely scary. It's a power trip, and one that carves its own identity to stand apart from everything that's come before in this franchise. I've got to tip the hat to Capcom here. The safest thing is to stick to what you know works. Being brave by taking the chance on something new has really paid off. Looking at both Not a Hero and End of Zoe together, the two experiences couldn't be further apart. Both tie at the loose ends of the RE7 story, but they come at it in their own distinct ways. Not a Hero is a spin on RE7's base formula, and End of Zoe throws everything away to come at it with essentially an entirely different game. The cost of End of Zoe is pretty steep, costing $11.99 for what is a 90-minute experience. But when you factor in Not a Hero being free, the reality of 3 hours of content costing $11.99 isn't too bad, especially when you have the opportunity to increase the difficulty and go for the various unlocks that the scenarios offer. Personally, I feel it was money well spent. I've paid far more for experiences which are half as fun as these two separate pieces of content. And with how much creativity is put into End of Zoe, it's a price I'm more than willing to pay. Value is ultimately in the eye of the beholder, and I'm not here to tell you how to manage your finances, but what I will stress is that these two experiences are more than worth your time. If you have 3 hours spare, install RE7 and give them a chance. You won't regret it. And that's it for this review. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more Resident Evil content. Did you play these two pieces of DLC? What did you think of them? Let me know in the comments and we can discuss it. I try to respond to everyone, so I'll look forward to talking it through with you. Thank you for your time. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.